Smoovers doesn't know what he's talking about. Editorials and hot take type content are all over YouTube, and while viewers may disagree with the point of the video, it's at least interesting to hear content creators state their case and give other perspectives that you might not have thought of. But every now and then, we come across a video that comes off as so narrow-minded and biased that we question how someone could formulate the opinion they do. Enter Smoovers with Left 4 Dead is a walking simulator. A video so misinformed and outright insane that even those commenting refuse to believe that it's actually a real opinion. No, ladies and gentlemen, he is not trolling. We're not looking at the second coming of Andy Kaufman. This is a real opinion and a real video that has been made. And I felt compelled to react and offer my own arguments about why Smoovers is 1000% wrong about Left 4 Dead. Let's begin.
Now, don't get me wrong, some of my favorite games are walking simulators. If you haven't played it, a good one I would recommend is The Beginner's Guide. There's no strategy or puzzles or challenging gameplay mechanics. You just walk forwards and experience the story.
He's using The Beginner's Guide as a reference here as if to say The Beginner's Guide is an example of a good walking simulator while Left 4 Dead 2 is a bad one. When in reality, the two games aren't comparable at all. They aren't the same game, they're different in a variety of ways, they're not comparable.
What more is there to Left 4 Dead 2 besides walking forwards interspersed with the occasional shooting straight ahead?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, you heard that correctly. After playing Left 4 Dead 2 for however long, the conclusion he came to was that all you do is walk forward and shoot. I question what type of playthrough experience you truly had, especially since the only gameplay footage you show in the video is the first 2 chapters of Dead Center, the first campaign.
To illustrate my point, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. 7.5 million views, Krobcat himself. I'd like to give my quick breakdown and analysis of this video in terms of my aforementioned position. Let's look at all the things this video addresses. Now, let's remove everything that doesn't affect gameplay.
So Smoovers is using the Krobcat video here as a reference/response and spends the time breaking down timestamps and what each section of Krobcat's video covers, only to then throw away 70% of the timeline as if all of that is irrelevant and not worthy of observation to begin with. Krobcat is making a really solid argument with the examples he's showcasing in his video, but if you're going to disregard them, how authentic of a response can your case be? And all those aforementioned non-gameplay parts absolutely affect the gameplay, and that is all a part of any game. You can't just single out one aspect in a game because every element goes hand in hand with one another. They complement each other.
Now you may say, but Mr. Science Mover, I love all of that immersion. It makes it feel like a movie. To which I say, yes, that's my point. The creators of Left 4 Dead 2 really put most of their effort into making the game a cinematic experience, rather than making it a fun experience.
It's hard to determine what point he's trying to make regarding cinematic experiences versus fun experiences when A, he champions and glorifies a game that has many similarities to Left 4 Dead, that game being Back 4 Blood, and B, who's to say a game can't be cinematic and fun? Cinema and gaming nowadays go hand in hand with each other. Games like The Last of Us or Detroit Become Human, even Grand Theft Auto, have a lot of film-esque qualities to them. That doesn't discount whether they're fun or not. Left 4 Dead definitely borrows from zombie movies like the George Romero zombie films, but it's still a game. You're still controlling your actions in this environment. This isn't some on-rails arcade shooter like you're describing it as.
The amount of effort put into zombie fall animations and character facial expressions that you'll probably never even see just goes to show that Left 4 Dead 2 is really just a movie where you control the camera.
The developer commentary in Left 4 Dead explains why there's so many zombie animations, and furthermore, that developer commentary was highlighted in Krobcat's video. I thought this was supposed to be a response of some kind, and yet you somehow skipped that completely.
We treat the infected horde as a major character in Left 4 Dead, and spend a lot of effort in making their movements believable.
Since players spend the vast majority of their time shooting the common infected, we wanted to improve the feedback and visceral nature of this experience.
So as stated, because you're going to be killing so many zombies, there should be many ways for them to be killed. Why taking the time and effort to do something like this is apparently a bad thing in your eyes is beyond me.
Let's remove everything that the video claims Back 4 Blood doesn't have, but which it actually does.
Krobcat's video, of which at this point you've discarded 90% of the timeline, does not argue that Left 4 Dead 2 has features that Back 4 Blood doesn't. Krobcat's video is stating that while both games have the same features, one game implements them better than the other.
Allow me to address the 3 complaints I removed here. First, we have bot AI. Back 4 Blood's bot AI has historically suffered as the game has a very high skill ceiling, and trying to emulate a player is near impossible.
He does not do it justice just how bad those bots in Back 4 Blood are, or at least were when I was playing a few years ago. When the bots in your game can't perform the simplest of tasks like rescuing teammates from specials or reviving teammates, what does that say about the rest of the game? Skill ceiling is not an excuse when your bots can't beat its own creation. And look, I know the Left 4 Dead bots aren't perfect, but guess what? They're actually functional. They help the player throughout the levels and can perform most of the same tasks as you. Almost as if they were created to work in the game that they were in. Go figure. Single player is actually an option in Left 4 Dead 2, while Back 4 Blood actively discourages it.
One complaint the Back 4 Blood community had was that on a team of 4 people, you'd start with 4,000 copper to share between you. In solo, you'd only have 1,000 copper. That's an issue for sure, but it's not an issue that Left 4 Dead 2 ever had to deal with. Their solution was to have no shop. I fail to see how the solution to a slightly unbalanced mechanic is not attempting it at all.
So with the logic he's presenting here, he's basically saying it's better to implement a feature poorly rather than not implement it at all. You can't saddle a game with that lazy argument as if Left 4 Dead was going for a shop like Back 4 Blood was. You do know that Left 4 Dead came out first, right? Ultimately, the creators of the game were going for a survival horror experience. The type of experience where you fight enemies with the resources available to you. The weapons and equipment you find in the world and not through a damn merchant or shop, I would imagine is a deliberate decision. They don't need to create a solution to something that isn't a problem in the first place.
Left 4 Dead 2 fans like to call the system that controls the enemy AI the G, D game director. As if any other system can't level up just because you gave this one a special name.
Nobody's saying that. No one is making that argument. That's not a thing. It just isn't.
Back 4 Blood doesn't have this adaptive game director, and that's a good thing. If I can't beat the game on the difficulty I set it to, then I want to at least know that the next time I play, I'll have learned and gotten better, until finally I can beat it.
So most players at launch, myself included, would witness a mutation system that would change each level regardless of whether you completed it or not. It's hard to learn from your mistakes when the mutations would drastically change the environment you would have to navigate to begin with. Nowadays, it's easy to take for granted how unforgiving Back 4 Blood could be since the game has been out long enough for metas and OP builds to be established. Back then, it was like being thrown into the deep end of the Pacific Ocean, and the challenge didn't come from honest gameplay, it came from being overwhelmed with a constant bombarding of enemies.
Left 4 Dead 2 fans like to claim that their game director can sense how well you're doing and send you more or fewer zombies depending on your progress. If you're struggling, it will calm the horde, and if you're doing too well, it'll send you more. If hard mode actually scales back down to easy mode, and easy mode actually scales up to hard mode, then are there really any difficulty settings at all? Do I really get a choice of what difficulty to play, or is it all an illusion?
You do realize the difficulty affects the damage you take in-game, right? Someone who knew that wouldn't make this graphic otherwise, because then that would make them look like an idiot. You talk about Left 4 Dead 2 not having standardized difficulty, but it does. The option you choose before a level is the standardization, and it affects other things like special health or friendly fire damage. At no point in the game does that constant ever change unless you or your team decide to change it yourself. You even reference official developer slides, but fail to even properly decipher what the point of the director ultimately is, which is a variety of things, including replayability, pacing, as well as balance. It's important to have a game that is providing a reasonable challenge to the players because too much of something can be overwhelming and chaotic, but too little makes it boring and predictable. Surely you had to have experienced something like this in your 30-minute playthrough of Left 4 Dead.
Next, let's address the flashlights issue. It's true that in Back 4 Blood you can't voluntarily toggle your flashlight, which is a bit annoying when trying to see into a car or other small unlit spaces. As well, your flashlight will always be facing forward, even if you're reloading or using a melee weapon. Although, as a player, I can't imagine that would be fun, not being able to see just because I'm using a hatchet.
Again, in Crobecat's video, the developer commentary covers why the flashlights are the way they are in Left 4 Dead.
These shadow-casting light sources not only add surface richness and provide important visual depth cues, they tie into gameplay. Because a player's flashlight is attached to his or her weapon, the light becomes pointed off to the side when reloading or performing a shove attack. Like so many of Left 4 Dead's game mechanics, this encourages cooperation, as players know they may be left in the dark if they choose to reload at the wrong moment.
And because for some reason this was important, the lights do cast shadows. There's just an option to turn it off, because it looks so good, and Unreal Engine is so much more pristine than the grunge of Source, that it might cook your computer.
Yeah guys, Back 4 Blood, this game is so finite, runs so well, that it might actually break your computer in the process. What type of paradox catch-22 ass statement is that?
Lastly, there's a strange focus on audio cues for some reason, but while we don't always get the movie-like piano notes of Left 4 Dead 2, Back 4 Blood does have the more realistic, distant rumbling and screaming of roaming specials, something you would learn from actually playing the game.
With the sounds you're presenting in this video, I'm willing to bet that most people believe the specials don't have audio cues at all because of how easy they are to miss, especially if you're in a horde or boss battle. You're not going to be able to hear that whatsoever. So, once again, let's see what Crobcat may have had to say regarding this audio.
In playtests, people were often confused by certain events and elements in the game. The addition of musical cues helped distinguish these events and diminish player confusion.
Players who leave the music on are treated to a variety of subtle audio cues that not only deepen the horror experience, but make them better players.
The key phrase in this clip is the audio serves to make the players better. While in Back 4 Blood, the lack of clearly identifiable audio cues, such as your clip shown, serves to make the game the confusing mess Left 4 Dead tries to avoid.
2 has 8 specials: the Witch, the Tank, the Boomer, the Charger, the Hunter, the Smoker, the Jockey, and the Spitter. First, we have our first class of special, the Stalker, Hawker, and Stinger. In Class 2, we have the Tall Boy, the Bruiser, and the Crusher. That leaves us with 23 total special infected, with each having different abilities and having to be dealt with accordingly. The depth here is incredible, and Left 4 Dead 2 doesn't hold a candle to it.
You heard it, Back 4 Blood has 23 specials and Left 4 Dead has only 8. So? What does that matter if so many of the specials are so homogeneous and just minor variants of one another? 23 to me is just a bloated number in comparison to 8. And even if the 23 specials were all that unique from one another, who wants to play a game where 23 specials can attack you at any given moment? That sounds overwhelming to the players. That's completely unreasonable for someone to be able to identify all of them. Meanwhile, the 8 specials in Left 4 Dead all operate completely differently. They have different clothing, different looks, different physiques from one another, and in combination with those ever-important audio cues, there is no mistaking what these enemies are.
Left 4 Dead 2 has 33 different weapons. That's a sizable amount, and I commend it for its variety, but Back 4 Blood has 42 different weapons.
Again, trying to state the case that more means better, but in this case, 33 weapons as opposed to 42 weapons isn't really that much of a significant increase.
And on top of that, each weapon can be upgraded. Starting from white to green to blue to purple gives most weapons a clear upgrade system. As well, it diversifies your selection.
So yeah, that tier system exists in all kinds of games nowadays, and I've seen it enough to where I pretty much groan anytime that's an existing feature in a game. It's not original by any means, nor is the overall upgrade mechanic that tangible to the average player, the stats, the numbers, unless that's just the type of gunplay you really enjoy and care for.
Let's imagine a scenario. You have a gun, and you find another one on the floor. You have to think about which to take. Say this happens in Left 4 Dead 2. You have 2 things to think about. First, do I want to use this gun? Maybe you prefer blowing heads off with a shotgun, and would prefer not to spray an Uzi. Next, what's the damage output? Well, you'd have to actually go to an external source to find that.
Yeah, you don't need a chart like this. The damage for weapons in Left 4 Dead 2 isn't a priority you even need to factor in. The player can use whatever they want. I've put in triple-digit hours into Left 4 Dead at this point, and never once have I concerned myself with this type of information.
There are many things to think about. 1. Does this gun work with my deck? Some decks are built around specific types of guns, and some cards only work with specific gun types. 2. Will I have enough ammo to use this gun? Guns use different ammo types, and if your team is running 3 shotguns, you might not want to pick up a 4th, because then you'll all be running out of ammo very quickly. 3. Is this gun a higher quality than my current gun?
What I see is an entire team stopping dead in their tracks to sift through a mass grave of items and equipment instead of progressing to the level. All of these factors you're trying to consider right now you don't even realize is impeding the progress you could be making through the mission. This is a constant loop of sorting and sifting that doesn't exist in Left 4 Dead, which allows you to focus on the game ahead of you.
Never mind the fact that if you're playing Back 4 Blood, you can always just ignore all of this and choose a gun the same way you would in Left 4 Dead 2.
With all the considerations suggested previously, I find that a little hard to believe. This isn't exactly a casual game. The idea of building a character deck and having the right weapons and equipment to face Back 4 Blood isn't exactly an optional experimental feature. It's almost mandatory to build these things up to even have a chance in Back 4 Blood.
Back 4 Blood puts a lot of time and effort into making the gameplay satisfying. Everything involves strategy and quick thinking. I never want to get caught out of position in case a horde is called. I'm always checking rooms for copper lying around that I can use later to buy supplies. Neither of these are present in Left 4 Dead 2.
No, that's just wrong. Left 4 Dead 2 does have these features present. In Left 4 Dead, if you're out of position or straying away from your teammates, you're far more likely to be swarmed by hordes of special infected since you're easier to target. And while the game doesn't have a shop that you for some reason faulted for, there does exist the need to loot and clear other areas to find extra equipment or weapons that you're going to no doubt need later on in the game. You're being incentivized to look beyond the straightforward path, and you're usually rewarded for doing so. If you're trying to play this game as if it's Time Crisis or some on-rail shooter, you're probably going to miss things like this. But again, you're 100% wrong.
Because in Left 4 Dead 2, the creators wanted to make a movie. You play the movie Left 4 Dead 2. Every playthrough is the same, and every player has the same experience as every other.
Yeah, also wrong. Left 4 Dead 2 is not providing the same exact Call of Duty type linear experience to everyone, and the fact that thousands of players are still enjoying the game 15 years after the fact is a testament to that. These people are not all having the same exact experiences, a lot of which is impartial to that pesky director you disdain so much.
In Back 4 Blood, you can play the same level as a sniper DPS role or a melee doc, as an aggro alert all the hordes pusher, or a stealthy disarm the alarms ninja.
He talks about these builds as if this game is some super deep Fallout-ass RPG, but a lot of the cards in-game require an egregious amount of currency that you can only buy in supply drops. You can't buy them as you want or need them. In fact, I remember during launch having a specific farming build for one level that everyone was playing over and over again just to be able to grind the currency needed. Everyone had this problem.
For my final point, Back 4 Blood does have a story, and even individual character backstories, which is even more impressive given that it has 11 characters, each with their own abilities, compared to Left 4 Dead 2's 4 identical characters.
For the umpteenth time, more does not automatically mean better. A game having 12 characters to choose from is not automatically better than 4. This is such a backwards mentality to have. One reason why characters may be identical has a lot to do with the accessibility of multiplayer. If one character has an ability over another, players are going to start establishing metas and preferences in a game that would ruin the idea of cooperation and teamwork. Also, with it being a multiplayer game, you might want to invite friends to play with you. Sometimes you might be in the middle of a game. Because the 4 survivors are identical, all they got to do is join the game and fill whatever slot is available. They don't have to worry about perks or being the right character. They can just jump in and play. I can tell you firsthand that on PC, players fill games all the time, and I've yet to see any complaints about which survivor they join it.
The Crobcat video does a great job of playing up the role of story in the development of Left 4 Dead 1, but makes no mention of Left 4 Dead 2. Why is that? Well, having played Left 4 Dead 2, it's because there is none.
Crobcat covering Left 4 Dead 1 has nothing to do with any characters or storyline being bad. He's using Left 4 Dead 1 since Turtle Rock would have been primarily developing that game before Valve stepped in. That's the reference point. The video is titled Back 4 Blood Proves Valve Carried Left 4 Dead and is comparing 2 different projects, one with Valve's influence and one without. Yes, there is a story in Left 4 Dead 2, and yet despite that, it isn't mandatory to play the maps in any order, nor is it necessary to even know the story. Each campaign tells a story within itself so that players can have free reign to engage whatever they want. Is a reason why all the maps are available to you at the start.
You play as 4 people who just happen to live next to each other and need to be rescued.
You play as 4 people who were all heading to an evacuation zone only to be left behind, and now those 4 people need to work together in order to make it to where that helicopter was going. Further events unfold from there.
On the contrary, there are a multitude of storylines in Back 4 Blood going on at the same time. Christine is named Mom because her son died on a rescue mission, and the others call her that since no one else is going to. Evangel is new to cleaning, and the first level is actually his first mission. Hoffman accidentally got his middle school teacher killed when she slipped on his backpack down the stairs. The backstory about the cleaners that you can find on any given playthrough goes pretty deep, but, you know, you'd have to actually play the game to know that.
So here we are again with the smart-ass comments about playing the game. Meanwhile, a lot of those character backgrounds sound like things that were rattled off in a character trailer, as opposed to organically finding these things out in-game.
War-torn veteran, check. Deadly accurate, check, check, check. He weirdly digs this whole apocalypse thing. He always comes prepared.
Who's laughing now?
Do all of these talking points really constitute character development at the end of the day? Or are they just things that happen to them? In fact, some of these backgrounds sound like some stories that Ellis might tell about his buddy Keith in Left 4 Dead.
I ever tell you about the time me and Keith filled up water balloons with our own...
Finally, here's a rapid-fire list of complaints I had while playing Left 4 Dead 2. Where do I start? And why are there so many levels?
Start on whatever level you want. Also, the same person who's been touting about Back 4 Blood having more weapons, more characters, more specials, now all of a sudden is complaining that Left 4 Dead has too many levels? Talk about hypocrisy.
Oh wait, it's because there are 3 different storylines. And actually, technically, the second storyline comes before the first storyline. And the third storyline isn't even canon.
Once again, you don't need to stress over storylines, play whatever you want. The reason why Left 4 Dead 1 maps come before the second is because they were added into the game years after release as DLC, and the non-canon maps that were post-release were made by the Left 4 Dead community, not developers.
Select a character. Well, actually, it doesn't matter who you pick, they all do the same thing, which is nothing.
He still has this hyper-fixation that these characters need to have the system in place that Back 4 Blood does to make it any good. We've already talked about why he's wrong.
Taking damage completely disorients your reticle. What the hell is even happening to me right now?
It's to show to the players that they're being attacked. You're looking at the ground inspecting a weapon, and because of the clear indicator that you're being hit, you then look up to kill the zombies hitting you. Looks like it did its job to me.
Anyway, those are my opinions on Left 4 Dead 2. I think going into it expecting it to be a game like Back 4 Blood was a mistake. I personally didn't have fun, but it also doesn't matter, because it's just a movie. I didn't want to watch a movie though, I wanted to play a game, and I don't really feel like I did.
Well, after watching this video, it's evident to me that you didn't want to like this game. Not in the slightest. Ladies and gentlemen, despite everything stated in this video, it's okay to not like Left 4 Dead. It's okay to believe that Back 4 Blood is better than Left 4 Dead. It is not okay to speak on a topic you failed to research and totally misrepresent a piece of media, all in order to glorify the game you do prefer, because ultimately this video is just one big Back 4 Blood defense response, as if someone around him went, "What? Why are you playing Back 4 Blood, man? Left 4 Dead is way better." And Smoovers took that personally. And it isn't lost on me that I may be showing my favoritism here. You can take one look at my channel and see which game I prefer. But if I ever decide to make a video titled Back 4 Blood is a walking simulator, you better believe my talking points are going to make sense.